Macropinnomicrostoma has the strangest appearance of any known vertebrate. This 15-centimeter fish that lives between 600 and 800 meters deep has a completely transparent head, a gelatinous dome through which its internal organs are seen. Inside that dome, two tubular eyes of intense green color oriented upward. For decades, scientists assumed that those eyes looked permanently upward based on dead specimens that arrived at laboratories with the dome destroyed. In 2009, the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute managed to film for the first time an intact living specimen and discovered that the eyes can rotate completely, pointing forward when the animal detects prey. The fish had existed in catalogs since 1939, 70 years waiting for someone to see it alive to know what it was really like. The ocean hid the face of a fish from us for 7 decades. In 2001, the National Institute of Ocean Technology of India announced the discovery of underwater structures in the Gulf of Khambhat off the coast of Gujarat in northwestern India. The structures, initially detected by sonar, showed regular geometric patterns suggesting urban planning, straight lines, angles, what appeared to be a grid of streets and buildings. Dredging operations recovered materials from the bottom, ceramics, worked stone artifacts, woods, a human tooth that was sent for carbon-14 analysis. The dating result was what turned the find into a scientific controversy of the first order. The organic material was dated at approximately 9,500 years old. If those dates are correct, and if the materials were really found in direct association with the geometric structures, the Gulf of Khambhat find would represent the oldest known city in human history, preceding Çatalhöyük in Turkey and the first cities of Mesopotamia by several millennia. The problem is the method. Dredging is a brutally imprecise form of archaeology. It does not allow establishing the stratigraphy of the materials, that is, in which exact layer of the sediment each object was found, which makes it impossible to determine if the dated artifacts really belong to the structures or were simply dragged to the area from elsewhere. The international archaeological community has been cautious for this reason. The structures are still there, still without being properly excavated, still without a definitive conclusion. In 2003, researchers from the Marine Sciences Department of Fox University in California were studying the migration of a large female white shark about 2 meters and 70 centimeters long, marked with a satellite data logger that measured temperature, depth, and position. The shark was swimming normally off the south coast of Australia, and then, 44 days into the tracking, the logger appeared on the beach. The data downloaded from the logger told a disturbing story. At a specific moment, the temperature recorded around the sensor jumped to 25 degrees Celsius almost instantaneously, and the sensor descended for 8 minutes to about 580 meters deep at a speed higher than any white shark can swim voluntarily. Both things at the same time, sudden heat and rapid descent. The temperature of 25 degrees corresponds to the internal body temperature of a warm-blooded animal. The tagged shark was inside the body of another animal. Subsequent analyses led researchers to conclude that the shark had been hunted and eaten by another white shark, estimated at least 5 meters in length based on the speed and depth of the descent. A giant white shark had hunted another white shark. It was not a territorial fight. It was predation with consumption. The white shark eats other white sharks, not in situations of extreme stress or as a last resort, with the efficiency of a consummate predator that has identified its prey and executed the hunt. The highest level of the oceanic food chain eats itself. In June of 2011, the underwater treasure hunting team Ocean X team, led by shipwreck hunters Peter Lindberg and Dennis Osberg, was operating in the Gulf of Bothnia between Sweden and Finland when their side-scan sonar produced an image that nobody knew how to interpret. A circular structure at the bottom of the sea, at about 85 meters deep, about 60 meters in diameter, with what appeared to be defined edges, symmetrical structures, a central depression, and what Lindberg described as a runway, extending about 300 meters from the main structure. The team also reported that electronic equipment failed anomalously when approaching the area. The world of the internet made it viral immediately. The comparison with the Death Star from Star Wars was inevitable. Speculations about a sunken spaceship or a secret installation reached mainstream media. The geological explanation that academic researchers have proposed is that it is a glaciotectonism formation. At the end of the last glaciation, about 10,000 years ago, the glaciers covering Scandinavia dragged enormous amounts of sediment and rock. When they melted, they left at the bottom of the sea that was exposed structures known as drumlins and moraines, which can be perfectly elliptical or circular and can create surprisingly regular geometric patterns. The Baltic Formation is a glacial moraine. The electronic failures the team reported were never reproduced in controlled conditions, but there are still people who go down to see it. Since at least the 18th century, sailors crossing the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea reported a phenomenon they had no way to explain: large wheels of light spinning beneath the surface of the water, not a diffuse luminous spot, but clearly rotational structures, with spokes emanating from a center spinning like windmill blades at different speeds, from tens to hundreds of meters in diameter. German oceanographer Kurt Kaller proposed in 1961 that the phenomenon was due to the combination of bioluminescent plankton with pressure waves of submarine seismic origin. The idea was that low-amplitude seismic waves propagating through the seafloor when there is tectonic activity could mechanically stimulate bioluminescent dinoflagellates, producing the rotational luminous pattern that observers describe. The problem with this explanation is that the light wheels do not always appear in zones of high seismic activity, that their shapes vary considerably between observations, and that some historical descriptions include wheels that rotated in opposite directions simultaneously, or several concentric wheels, which would require multiple perfectly coordinated seismic sources. No camera has ever captured a sharp image of this phenomenon in its entirety. It remains one of the few oceanic phenomena documented continuously for centuries, for which modern science has no completely satisfactory explanation. In November of 1995, the freighter Lima, sailing in the Indian Ocean off the coast of Somalia, entered an area where the seawater glowed with a pale, diffuse light. It was not wave bioluminescence, the blue glow that appears when you agitate the water. It was a uniform, soft white-bluish luminosity that covered several square kilometers of oceanic surface and made the sea appear illuminated from within. This is what sailors called for centuries milky seas, or seas of milk, described in nautical records dating back to the 17th century. Melville mentioned it in Moby Dick. For generations it was assumed to be sailor superstition, until satellite images began to confirm that the phenomenon was real and much more common than anyone imagined. The scientific explanation that has been established is that milky seas are caused by massive blooms of the bioluminescent bacteria Vibrio parvae, which can cover areas of tens of thousands of square kilometers and produce a continuous luminescence, unlike the specific flash of the dinoflagellates that produce common wave bioluminescence. What is still not clear is what triggers these massive blooms. The bacteria are always present in the ocean in small quantities. Under specific conditions of temperature, nutrients, and water chemistry, they multiply explosively until covering areas the size of countries. But those specific conditions are not completely identified, which makes milky seas unpredictable and still partly mysterious. In 1930, Danish oceanographer Anton Brun was analyzing samples collected by the Dana expedition in the South Atlantic when he found in the nets something that was disturbing to him: an eel larva of the transparent and flat leaf type known as Leptocephalus, with a length of about 184 centimeters, an eel larva of nearly 2 meters. The eels we know, European and American eels, have Leptocephalus larvae between 7 and 15 centimeters in length before metamorphosing into the adult form. If the relationship between larva and adult size of Leptocephalus giganteus were similar to that of common eels, the adult animal could reach 30 meters in length. 30 meters, 3 times the size of a white shark. A second specimen was identified in 1959 by New Zealand biologist Peter Castle, reinforcing the hypothesis that it was a real species and not an aberrant specimen. The alternative interpretation, defended by modern researchers, is that Leptocephalus giganteus belongs to a group of deep-sea eels that simply have a larva-adult relationship very different from common eels, and that the adult animal perhaps measures only 2 or 3 meters. There are precedents. Some deep-sea eels have disproportionately large larvae compared to their adult size. The problem is that nobody has ever found the adult animal. If an enormous deep-sea predator exists that was the biological origin of the sea serpent myths, it continues swimming somewhere between 500 and 2,000 meters, completely oblivious to our curiosity. In 2015, a joint team of Greek and Swedish archaeologists led by researcher Despina Kutsumba from the Ministry of Culture of Greece and marine archaeologist Peter Norden was performing a systematic exploration of the seabed south of Athens in an area of the Saronic Gulf, rich in historical archaeological remains. They expected to find perhaps scattered pottery, remains of amphorae, the fragmentary vestiges that the passage of thousands of years and the movement of currents leave of any coastal site. What they found was an entire city. About 12 hectares of architectural structures submerged under about 3 meters of water, buildings, walls, pavements, towers, the remains of a Bronze Age city that, according to preliminary dating, existed approximately 3,000 and 4,000 years ago. The excavations revealed defensive walls with towers of a design that specialists in ancient Greek architecture had not seen in any other known site, which suggested that the city could belong to a construction tradition distinct from or prior to the best documented ones. How this city fell under the sea is part of the mystery. The coasts of the eastern Mediterranean have experienced changes in sea level over the millennia, as well as significant seismic activity. Poseidon, the sea god of the Greeks, was also the god of earthquakes. Perhaps that duality was not coincidence but memory.